Hello, I'm William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and today I received a question from a parent working with a younger student in Latin reading who asked for some clarification about Latin verb forms. And as I thought about answering the question, I said to myself, this is probably a good opportunity to get into some general issues in Latin studies that I think will help the kids with their classical studies. So I'm going to respond to this question with a video. And not only am I going to respond to this specific question that came in today, but I'm also going to give students who are getting started in Latin studies something of an explanation for why we study what we do study when we study Latin reading and grammar. So bear with me as I go through this, and I'll both answer this question and provide some helpful advice or explanation for kids getting started with Latin studies. So let me share the question that I received. And I wrote these words down here below, which we'll take a look at individually. But here's the question that came in from a parent today. I'm confused about some verb forms in Latin reading. This is from lesson 22 in Latin reading. I'm confused about some verb forms. Verbs that end in it are different tenses in the vocabulary. For instance, Misit, Dedit, and Venit are translated as has sent, has given, and has come. But Diligit and Credit are translated as loves and believes. Venit is also sometimes came, and Videbit is shall see. It's confusing for memorization. Is there a rule for this? And so what the parent is asking is, these verbs, from what we've heard, the verb endings tell us how to translate the verbs. And if we look at all these verbs, we see that these verbs all have the same endings. They all end in it. Here's it, it, diligit, it, venit, it, videbit, it. All these it endings, and yet all these different translations, different tenses, and so on. So what's going on here? The first answer is Latin vocabulary. Latin grammar is a lot more complicated than this. So we have some general rules that are just given to help. They're not even rules. They're just sort of recommendations to help make things easier. But it gets more complicated than this. And so what I'd like to do is show you how we can begin to understand these things and why it's so important to study Latin grammar. All right, so what I'm going to do is take a look at these 6 different verb forms, and then we'll take a look at a Latin dictionary. And there's one other thing I want to look up. If we just look up Latin verb conjugations on Google and scroll down, you can find my Latin verb conjugation chart right here. You see this is from the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. So let's open this up, and we'll take a look at this in a little bit because it'll show some answers, help us explain some things. All right, so anyway, let's take this first verb and see what's going on with this Latin verb. We can see it's spelled M-I-S-I-T, and the translation in the Latin reading is he sent. He sent. And this verb, misit, is related to the English word missile, right? Something that's sent, something that's fired and launched. A missile is something that's sent. A missionary is someone who's sent on a mission. That's what the word mission really means, similar to apostle. Well, anyway, if we were to take this word misit in Latin and look it up in a Latin dictionary, we wouldn't find it. So let's just hop over to a Latin dictionary. I know it's a little foggy to look at here, but if we were to look around on this page, we wouldn't find the verb misit, M-I-S-I-T. And Latin grammar would teach us that this verb is actually mitto, M-I-T-T-O. This is where this verb comes from. And if we look at a dictionary, at a Latin dictionary, we'll see that there's a bunch of information given to us in the dictionary. A Latin dictionary is written for people who have studied Latin grammar. So you would have to know what this information means from your Latin grammar studies to really understand this verb. So I'd like to just show you real quick, because this is what we study in Latin grammar. So that they give us a number of forms here. Here we see the form mitto, M-I-T-T-O. Here we see misi, M-I-S-I. And then over here we see missus, M-I-S-S-U-S. And then we see these three letters, E-R-E. So we have mitto, misi, missus, and ere. So what does all that mean? Well, with these four pieces of information, you can figure out all of the meanings, all of the different forms of this verb. So if you have these four important pieces of information, you can figure out all of the forms for this verb. What are these four forms? The first one here, mitto, the first form that's given is the first person singular present tense form. First person singular present. So mitto, if we look at the meaning of the verb down here in italics, it says to cause to go, to send. So mitto means I send. It's the first person singular present tense form. Mitto, I send. They give you that first form because that's the first important form we need to know to be able to conjugate the verb through all of its different forms. The second form that they give us, misi, is the first person singular. So again, we have first person singular, but it's the perfect tense. So the first form is the present tense. The second form is the perfect tense. And the reason why they give us this second form is because in the perfect tense, the stem and the endings change. So the stem of the verb changes in the perfect tense. And what we see is the verb mitto, M-I-T-T, is the stem in the present tense. That stem changes to M-I-S in the perfect tense. So the perfect tense stem is M-I-S, and the first person singular ending in the perfect is I. So we have the I there. And again, you'll learn those forms when you study the verb. So mitto means I send. It's the present tense form. Misi means I have sent. It's the perfect tense form. The next form that they give us over here, missus, is the perfect passive participle. Perfect passive participle. That's the third form that we need to know when we're studying a verb. And you see that the perfect passive participle here is missus, which means sent. So we have I send, mitto, I have sent, misi. We have sent, missus. And then lastly, we have these three letters. For mitto, we have these three letters, E-R-E. And that tells us the present infinitive form of this verb. The present infinitive. So mitto means I send. Mittere, M-I-T-T, and then this E-R-E, mittere, means to send. It's the present infinitive form. So those are the four forms we see in a Latin dictionary. And if we know those four forms and we know Latin grammar, we've studied Latin verb forms, we can figure out any form of that verb that we need to know, even the participles. So that's what's shown here for us in the Latin dictionary. It's a lot of information, a lot of important information for someone who has studied Latin grammar and knows what to do with that information. So we have mitto, misi, missus, mittere, mittere. And we know that this verb means to send. So now if we look back here at this verb form, we see that it does end in it or in t, so it's third person singular, but what's important is the stem is mis. And if you remember, that's the perfect tense stem. It ends in MIS. So it doesn't start with MITT, which is the present tense form. It starts with MIS, which is the perfect tense form. So we know that MISIT is a perfect tense verb. And then it ends in IT. And that's why this verb, we can say it's third person, it's singular, it's perfect tense, and it translates as he has sent, or just he sent. Okay, that's where all of that information comes from. Now let me show you how I know that that's true. Let's look at this conjugation chart. On this conjugation chart, you'll see that there are 4 separate sets of 2 columns. And I know this looks crazy, but it's actually quite simple. Again, once you understand what is actually on this sheet. And this is a sheet that I developed probably 15 years ago for my Latin students. That's really helpful once you study Latin grammar. So what we see is we see 4 example verbs, and let's see if I can zoom in on this a little bit here. There's 4 example verbs. Maybe I can just open this up. Let me see if I can download it and open it up. Give me a second. Yeah, I can. Let me see if I can pull this over on my screen here and open this up for you. And then zoom in a little bit. Yeah, that's much better. Okay. So we have 4 sample verbs up at the top of this sheet. We have amo, amare, doceo, docere, lego, leggere, and audio, audire. 4 example verbs. And each of these verbs represents a different group of verbs in Latin. Now this is why in the dictionary they give you the first person singular form, because you need to know that to identify the verb. So here we have that first person singular form. And then remember, they also give us 3 letters at the end in the dictionary. Here's those 3 letters. We see here A-R-E, we see here E-R-E, we see here again E-R-E, and we see here I-R-E. So those 3 letters at the end of that dictionary entry reveal to us which of these 4 different groups or conjugations that verb belongs to. Now, when we saw that verb, misit, when we looked it up in the dictionary, we found that the present tense form was mitto. It ends in an O. And the infinitive form ends in E-R-E. If you look at here, doceo ends in E-O and then ends in E-R-E. That's not like the verb we looked at. Lego ends in O and ends in E-R-E. So this is the verb conjugation that we're concerned with. Mittere or misit, that verb misit, is coming from this 3rd verb conjugation. And we saw that it has a perfect tense stem. So we're going to go down here, and if you look here, you see that this is the perfect tense. And so we're going to highlight this row because this shows us all of the perfect tense forms. And we said that misit is like Lego. So when we come down here, we find this verb form right here, legit. That's the form that misit is in this reading. It's 3rd person singular, it's perfect tense, and it's of this 3rd conjugation. So there's lots of information packed into that verb form, which we can start to unravel with the help of a dictionary and then really understand with our knowledge of Latin grammar. So that verb misit in Latin reading has the same characteristics as this verb legit in our Latin grammar verb conjugation chart here, which gives us all the info. And it means he has sent, just like legit means he has read. Okay, so you can see the form there and understand something of the characteristics of that verb. Let's get back to this lesson here. So misit is 3rd person singular perfect, he has sent. That should be pretty simple. Next up we have dedit. We have this verb dedit, and once again, if you look it up in a dictionary, you're not going to find it. It's not going to be there because dedit is not the first form of the verb. So where are we going to look? Let me zoom out here and center this we're going to fly back, and we'll just use these guide words at the top of the page until we find the D's. So here we are, we're in deripio and descripto, but dedit is not in the dictionary if you look it up. So we've got to figure out what verb does this actually come from. And I know this because I know Latin grammar. It comes from do, D-O. So let's find D-O. Let me try to jump ahead a little bit. Where is this verb? Here's D-I. We're looking for D-O. There's D-O-S. So let's go back a little bit. It's on this page here. Do. Let's find it. Oh, not yet. Donarium, domicilium, documentum, do, and here we're going to find it. All right, so let's find this verb do right here. Here you can see the verb do in the dictionary. This is where this verb dedit comes from, and the only reason I know that is because I've studied Latin grammar. So there's no way for a new student to understand that without memorization. But that word dedit, D-E-D-I-T, comes from do. And now let's look what the dictionary shows us about this word. The first person singular present form is do. Then we see the perfect form is dedi. So you can see where dedit comes from. It's the perfect tense form of do is dedi, and dedit is one of those forms. We then have the perfect passive participle, which is datus. And then we have the letters A-R-E, A-R-E. So that's all the information that we need to be able to identify this verb form. We know it's do. That's the present tense form, and dare is the infinitive form. So do dare, that's going to be first conjugation. So let's get back to that verb chart. Do dare is like amo, amare. So this is the conjugation that verb belongs to. It has a present tense stem. So we're going to go down here to the perfect, it has a perfect tense stem. We're going to go down here to the perfect tense forms. And so we see dedit is the perfect tense stem plus the ending T, which is just like amavit here. So amavit means he has loved, and dedit means he has given. He has given. So we have our form, we have all the characteristics of the verb form, and so on. That's how this chart helps us. So for dedit, it's third person singular, that's true. It's perfect tense, and we know that because, and I'll highlight this, we know that because of these perfect tense stems, which identify the perfect or past tense. It's third singular perfect, and it translates as he has given. Sorry. He has given. Okay, so that's where that translation of dedit comes from. Now we've got venit, and things get a little more complicated. So the first thing we've got to do, let's go find it in the dictionary. We're going to go to the V's. There's the S's, still in S's, T's. Here we have verus, verto. Let's just find this verb here. Now, because I've studied grammar again, I know that this verb, venit, is coming from the Latin verb venio. Here we have it right here, okay? Venio. So we have the present tense form is venio. We have the perfect tense form is veni. We have the participle ventus, and then we have the infinitive form ire. So venire is the infinitive. You can see the infinitive ends in ire. That means this is a fourth conjugation verb. So if I look back at the verb chart, it ends in ire. So not this one, not this one, not this one. It's this one. It's the fourth conjugation. That's why knowing that ire ending is important. So it tells us that venire is one of these fourth conjugation verbs. Now, we're going to have a little bit of difficulty with venit, because if you look, the present tense stem and the perfect tense stem are pretty much the same. It's VEN. So venit is going to be both a present tense form and a perfect tense form. It's going to be both a present tense form and a perfect tense form. So that's what gives us some confusion about venit. Sometimes it can be present tense, sometimes it will be past tense. The context will tell us which it is, and that's why the question here is very observant. Venit is translated has come in one place, and then venit is also sometimes, venit is translated as come in the present tense in some places, but then venit is also sometimes translated came in the perfect tense. And the reason why is because venit can be present or perfect. So we have third person singular, which is right, but it can be present or perfect. And therefore it can mean he comes or he has come. So that confusion there is legitimate because it's a unique verb form that can have two different tenses in the same form. Okay? So that's that. Next up we have diligit. Diligit. So we have to go back to the Latin dictionary. Let's go find the D's here. We're looking for diligo. Diligo. So let me just flip around here using these guide words to help me find it. Diligo. So we have dies, we have dignitas. We're looking for diligo. Looks like it's going to be on this page here. So I scroll down and I find this verb diligo right here. Diligo. Here's our verb we're looking for. And now we have all of this information. We have diligo, that's the present tense. Then we have dilexi, that's the perfect tense. Dilectus is the perfect past participle, or passive perfect participle. Dilectus. And then diligere is that infinitive ending. It ends in o and ere, so that means it's a third conjugation verb like lego, legere. Okay, so we have these forms. Diligo means I love. We can see that the meaning of this is to love or to value something. Diligo, I love. Dilexi, I have loved. Dilectus means loved. And then diligere means to love. So when we look back at this form, we have diligit, and I'll put this in green here, because this is the present tense. Better green than that, sorry. Let me do it in blue. I'll use blue for present tense, okay? Diligit is the present tense stem. So this is going to have its third person singular. It's present. It doesn't have the perfect tense stem. And so it means he loves, or he delights, he values something. Okay, that's why that's present tense, because of the stem. Next up we have credit. Next up we have credit. So let's go find that in the dictionary. It's credo is the verb. I believe. It's where we get the first verb of the Apostles' Creed is credo. That's the same verb here. So credit. Let's find this verb in our dictionary. There we have crumena. We're getting closer. We're looking for credit. Crepo. Crebritas. So we're one page back. Here we go. So let's find credit. Or credo. Here it is right here. Here's our verb. Credo is the present tense. Credo, I believe. Then we see that the perfect tense doubles the D. So it's credidi. Credidi means I have believed. Creditus is the passive perfect participle. And then credere is the infinitive form. So this is another third conjugation verb like lego. Credo, credidi, creditus, and credere. So this verb credit, it doesn't have that double D in the stem. So this is another present tense stem. So just like this, it's going to be third singular present, he believes. Present tense. How do we know present tense? Not because of the ending, but because of the stem. All right? And then we've got one more. And this raises another issue of tense. Okay? So here we have Videbit. Videbit. So let's go get in the dictionary and find this verb. It comes from the Latin verb video, which is where we get the English word video from. Video means I watch or I see. So let's find video. Looks like I went a little too far here. Here we go. Vicis, victus, video. Here's our verb right here. Video. All right, so we have the present tense stem is video. That means I see. Vidi, here we have the perfect tense stem. And we see again, the perfect tense stem here is the same as the present tense stem. So this is going to be a verb that could cause a little confusion. We then have the participle visus, which means seen. And then we see that the infinitive ending is ere, and notice that it has a long symbol over that first e. That tells us that this is second conjugation. And it's easy to see that because the second conjugation always ends in eo, not o. So we had mito, mitere. We had diligo and diligere. But here we have an e added to this first form, video, videre. So this is a second conjugation verb. Let me just show you that real quick on the verb chart. If you look at this second conjugation verb, you'll see it ends in eo and ere. And the reason why is because that e in the second conjugation is a long e. The e in the third conjugation is a short e, and that's why it doesn't show up in that first form. Now I know that's a lot of information, but I'm just showing you where this information comes from, and we're going to study this when you study Latin grammar. So video, videre is like doceo, docere. So the forms are going to be like those forms of doceo. That's where this is coming from. However, the verb form that we looked at is a little different because it's got this combination stuck in here, and I'll use another color, maybe a bright purple. We have this stem, which could be either present or perfect. We're not sure yet. We have this ending, which appears to be a third person ending, but we've got this little thing stuck in here, this bi, and that's significant. That's significant. Let's figure out what this bi is. If we go back to this verb chart, sorry, let me pull it up. If we go back to this verb chart and remember that video is like doceo, so it's a second conjugation verb. If we look down here to the future tense, we'll find something interesting. Down here in the future tense, you can see bis, bit, bimus, bitis. You see that bi stuck in there? That marks the future tense. So that bi is actually what tells us that this verb is future tense. And here we see that bit ending. So it's third person singular, but it's future tense. That's what's going on there. I think it's actually, yeah, it's videbit, right? That was the word? Yeah, videbit. So videbit, we have third person singular, sorry. But it's future tense, and we know that because of that little bi stuck in there. And it means he, I'm sorry, quote, he shall see. So we can see all of these words that were raised in this question. They all have different translations. They have different tenses, and the mother who sent in this question is asking, what in the world's going on here? Why are the endings all similar, but the translations are all different? And we can see from our study of these verbs, we can see why there's different translation, because there's a lot of stuff going on in here. Some of these words, even though they all end in it, some of them have perfect tense stems, some of them have present tense stems, and another one has a future tense symbol in the ending of it. So when you take all of that information into consideration, you come up with all these different translations. Now, there's no way for a student to know all that until he has a chance to study Latin grammar and learn all this. And like I said, you can use this verb chart to help out. You can get a copy of this on the website and just use it to try to find things, look things up. And if you pay attention to what I showed you in this video, you can see how the dictionary and this verb chart work together to help you really identify just about any, I should say, regular verb form in Latin using this chart. It's quite a useful tool, and I don't think you'll find this chart anyplace else. So, is there an explanation? Is there a rationale for all of these different translations? Yes, it's all based on Latin grammar. Can a beginning Latin reading student understand all this stuff? No, he has to study Latin grammar. But when we go through grammar, we start Latin verbs in lesson 35 of Latin Grammar 1. We'll go through all of this stuff, and everything on this chart and in the dictionary will become crystal clear. So there is a place and a time to learn all these things, but when you're going through Latin reading, because you don't know grammar, you have to rely on memorization. So it is difficult, and there are lots of different things to be remembered and memorized. And that's my best argument for why you need to study Latin grammar, because if you don't learn Latin grammar, you're stuck with memory work. You really can't understand what's going on. When I look at these different passages, when I look at a Latin reading lesson, I can look at these verbs and I can identify all of these things because I've studied grammar. And that's where I get all the translations and all the different characteristics from. It's all present in that word. It just takes time to study the grammar and gain experience building vocabulary, gaining experience with lots of different Latin verbs, knowing all their forms, and then occasionally looking a form up in a dictionary to make sure you've got all their important forms right. Just so you know, when you look at the Latin dictionary, these 4 forms that are given to us, sometimes they're referred to as the principal parts of a verb. The principal parts, or the starting points for figuring out all the different forms of the verb. So just to review that, you have the first person singular present tense form. You have the perfect tense form, which shows you the perfect stem, which is important. You then have the passive perfect participle. And then lastly, you have the present infinitive form. And if you have the present first person singular form and the present infinitive form, you can use that verb chart to identify which part of which conjugation that verb belongs to, and then use all of those forms there to help you understand exactly what's going on with that Latin verb. So it's not simple. There's no easy explanation for it, but there is an explanation behind these translations. And if you really want to wrap your mind around this and gain mastery so that you can look at these verbs and understand all of the information that's packed into them, you simply have to study Latin grammar. So I hope that's helpful. If you have any other questions like this, feel free to ask. Even though I know you're going to study this in Latin grammar, I'm happy to explain these things in advance because it'll also help motivate your Latin grammar studies, because you'll see why it's important and how it's going to help you in the future. So I hope that's a helpful answer to that question. And if you have any more, just keep sending them along. God bless.